Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to talk about something that is a little bit in the media and timely to what is going on today. I'm going to give you a bit of an explanation about the subject of Bitcoin, and in particular talk about what are you buying when you buy Bitcoin, and is there something real tangible there, or is it just something in the air? I'd watched an interview with, or not an interview, but kind of a dialogue with Kevin O'Leary, where he was talking about this subject, and there's something that kind of commonly comes up. There was both somebody on Facebook as well as somebody on our channel had kind of posed this question of like, hey, I can't wrap my head around it. What am I buying? And this is, topical right now because Bitcoin has been going crazy of late. I think it crossed, like, as of the time of this video, I think yesterday it crossed 34,000. So pretty high, new all-time highs, etc. And so people are doing very well, etc. So it's worth kind of diving in and understanding, what is this thing? Does this thing make any sense, etc. So I'm going to kind of go through and give the best explanation that I can here and kind of conceptualize it in a way that hopefully helps you to understand a different way of thinking around these kind of digital assets. So let's jump into that. But before we do, if you have not already, please smash the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our videos. If you're interested at all in the subjects that we talk about here, in terms of like how I can help you, this is international tax planning. How do you pay the lowest legal amount of tax possible? So helping you to get your tax rate down, protecting your assets from divorce, from creditors, from lawsuits, etc. Forming international companies, opening offshore bank accounts, getting residencies around the world, getting alternative citizenships, etc. Please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. There's a link below, or you can check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, well, let's dive into it. All right, so just really quickly, for those who aren't familiar, the kind of concept of what we call decentralized ledger technology and Bitcoin is largely built around this idea that it's kind of like unhackable, right? It's supposed to be what we'd call a trustless system, and the whole key value proposition in many respects is the idea of digitizing trust. Now, not all cryptocurrency projects achieve this. Some are not really actually decentralized, they're actually centralized, and there you get into a whole conversation around this point. But to understand what's going on here, let's just start by thinking about the idea of being hacked, okay? So what happens when say a bank or your house or something like that is hacked? Of course, somebody can extract information, that's one thing. But more significantly, they can change information, right? So imagine if you have a bank account balance, that's really just a line on a spreadsheet, right? It has a balance number. Somebody, if they could hack in, they could go and change that information and boom, potentially say, oh great, we debited from your account and added to our account, and this was wonderful. That's not possible with something like Bitcoin, or it's extraordinarily difficult with something like Bitcoin. Okay, how is that? Well, you have this concept of this decentralized ledger, and the easiest way to understand this is imagine you've got that spreadsheet, right? But then all these other different participants around the world, what we call nodes, and there's over 10,000 nodes around the world, all have the same ledger, okay? Which is a historical, immutable, append-only ledger or record of all the transactions that have ever happened on the Bitcoin network, okay? Why is this important? Because what happens is if you make a change to that one, then what it's going to do is it's going to broadcast it to the network, and the network is going to compare it to what they have, and it's going to say, oh, this doesn't match, and it's going to reject those changes, okay? Now, you get into all kinds of fancy things about how it is that the blocks are created, and how you end up with the longer chain, and the longer chain ends up being the one that they go for, and kind of this whole process that takes place through what's called proof of work, okay? I'm not going to go through all that today. That's not really, I think, the important part of this conversation, but it's just useful to understand that, hey, listen, you have this distributed network of independent nodes. They aren't jointly owned, they don't have anything to do with each other, etc., all running the software, all running the protocol, I guess you would call it, making this thing work really well. And it does a number of things. First of all, the fact that it's distributed means it's censorship resistant. What does this mean? It means there's no single point of failure. In fact, there's no 100 points of failure. So this basically makes it so governments can't really shut it down. They can't really say, hey, you're not allowed to send to this address, etc. Okay, so that's a really, really important thing, the fact that it is a censorship-resistant network. Okay, and so some people would say, hey, well, what if Bitcoin, the government shuts Bitcoin down? They basically can't. They could shut down, individual mining farms. They could make it illegal to transact in Bitcoin. They could go and try and shut down exchanges. But the Bitcoin network itself is essentially impossible to shut down. Okay, so that's a very good thing. Second of all, it's trustless. Okay, so you don't need an intermediary. So normally what happens when you transact is, for instance, let's talk about, say, buying a property, right? I don't actually transfer my money from me to the person who is going and giving me the thing. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm transferring my money to the lawyer. They're transferring the title to the lawyer. They're making sure the conveyancing has taken place, etc. Everything, the title is clear, everything's good, and then they're swapping, right? So you have this kind of escrow intermediary. That's actually quite expensive and doesn't really make a lot of sense for many of these transactions. Now, of course, if you and I are in person and you have the goods and I have the item, we can just swap like that. But in a global world, this is a tougher thing to do, right? So blockchain and decentralized ledger technology enable you to do these transactions without having to have a middleman, because code can take place instead. And the network itself is making sure that that code runs properly, okay? So this brings us to the important question of, when you buy Bitcoin, what are you really buying? Because what a lot of people will say is they'll say, hey, listen, you're not really buying anything. It's just this digital thing, right? It's just in the air. And some of the people's arguments will say, well, hey, when you buy money, it's just based on a belief system of what it's worth. That's not totally true. It's ultimately backed up by force, and there's some other pieces in there related to kind of the forcing you to accept that. But then there's a whole network of goods and services that are priced in that thing, so that there's this exchangeability, right? But to think of Bitcoin like money is not really a very accurate way to look at it. It is highly unlikely that Bitcoin will become money, okay? Bitcoin, they will say, is more like gold. That's probably true. I would say it's more like a digital commodity than it is like a currency, okay? But let's just think about, what are you really getting? And I think it took me a long time to wrap my head around this idea and try to conceptualize it, because it is kind of fundamentally different, right? What you're getting is, you're getting a piece of this network, okay? This censorship-resistant, highly secure, decentralized, trustless network, okay? And the question becomes, what is that network worth? So how many people around the world want to be able to utilize that network, want to have that functionality, want to have that security, want to have the features that are offered by this network, okay? Bitcoin is the currency used to pay the people who keep the network secure and running, okay? In other words, the network is run by what they call miners. Miners are basically just people operating computers all over the world, and these computers are what process the transactions. And so what you're basically saying is, you're saying, hey, listen, I'm going to own a little piece of this infrastructure that offers this value proposition of being trustless, of being censorship resistant, of being hyper secure, more secure arguably than pretty much anything that we've created in the history of the world, right? And okay, like, what's that worth? When you have one person who wants it, it's not worth a lot, right? But the more people who decide, hey, that's a pretty valuable use case, I'd like that. I want security. I want some trustless environment. I want something that's censorship resistant. Well, as that grows, that's the demand side of this infrastructure, okay? So I think that's, like, to me, the easiest way to conceptualize it. And there's a lot of Ethereum, you could say, arguably is quite similar. I'll do a video in the future about Ethereum, and kind of it's more complex in that it executes smart contracts, etc. But the point is, think of this idea of buying a piece of infrastructure, okay? And if you understand it in that way, I think it seems less nebulous, less airy-fairy, and you can sort of start to understand how, hey, listen, yeah, this network that does something is really valuable. And normally what you would do is, say Microsoft or Amazon Web Services or something like that. They would run a network of computers and they would charge you fees and they would make profit off that. Here, there's no central authority that is running it and charging you fees. Instead, the fees are built into the network system itself. Anyone can help to run it. And that's the way these people are compensated. Okay, so anyway, I hope that helps. I hope it's kind of an interesting, maybe a little bit different way of conceptualizing this idea and helping you to wrap your head around, hey, listen, is that worthwhile? Is that, I think that as you start to dig into it and you think of the world that we live in, the ability to have something censorship resistant that's virtually completely secure, at least at this point in time, that is transparent, et cetera, is really, really a valuable asset. And collectively, I mean, if Amazon Web Services as a network of computers that runs all sorts of stuff is worth XYZ, well then, this network would kind of similarly be worth XYZ. And it's, because it is so unique at this point in time, that makes the value quite a bit higher. Now, it's possible that in the future, there's going to be competitors that achieve the same level of security, the same level of being censorship resistant, et cetera, but also have a bunch of other value propositions, and that could, on a relative basis, end up hurting the value of the Bitcoin network. But we'll see what happens in the future. Anyway, I hope that helps. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Please share it with your friends. Really appreciate if you can support us. If you, again, haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, make sure you don't miss out on any videos. And if you're interested at all in the subjects that we talk about here, reach out to me. Would love to help you, and we will talk to you guys on the next video.